But everything changes the day his eyes meet Ethan's, a wealthy boy failing in silence inside that very classroom. What begins with a stolen glance turns into a bond that will shake two worlds, one of privilege, the other of pain. A hidden friendship, a powerful father, and a decision that could change everything. Stay with us because this story might change how you see the world. It was a cold November morning when Malik crouched behind the rusted chain-link fence that separated Lincoln Hall's manicured world from the forgotten city around it. He had been there since dawn, his legs folded tightly beneath him, a torn hoodie doing little to shield his spine from the chill creeping through the concrete. In his lap, a greasy piece of cardboard balanced on his knees, already covered with jagged pencil marks, syllables, fractions, simple sentences half heard, half guessed. Every time the wind shifted, he tilted his head to catch more of the lesson leaking out through the cracks in the classroom wall. He had done this before at other schools, other places. But this one was different. The teachers here spoke with calm authority. The lessons had rhythm. He could almost taste the knowledge, almost see the shapes of words before they were spoken. But more than that, Lincoln Hall didn't smell like bleach and fear like the shelters did. It smelled like books and paper and safety. Malik didn't know what that meant yet. Not exactly. But he wanted in, not through the front gate. That was never for boys like him. But through the edges, the pieces, the sounds. Through the broken parts, if that's all he had. From the other side of the world, or at least that's what it felt like, Ethan Harrison sat hunched over a desk made of polished wood, blinking hard at a test paper that looked more like a threat than a challenge. He had circled the same question 4 times, changed his answer 3, and still felt the sweat collecting at the base of his neck. Around him, classmates whispered, scribbled, exhaled. The boy next to him had already flipped his page. The girl across the aisle was stretching like she'd just finished a light jog. Ethan felt like his mind was drowning, and not because he didn't try. He had studied. At least he thought he had. But no matter how many tutors came and went, no matter how many weekends were sacrificed for private sessions and silent punishments, the words always jumbled, the numbers floated. And worse than the failure was the look he knew would come later, the tightening jaw of his father, the measured silence, the disappointment that filled entire rooms without making a sound. That morning, the only thing Ethan wanted more than to disappear was for someone to tell him it was okay not to be perfect, but perfection was expected, especially when your last name was Harrison. Malik watched the boy from behind the broken window at the back of room 3B. The glass had shattered weeks ago. Some fight. A ball, a careless arm, no one had fixed it. It was a small break, but it was enough. Through it, Malik could see the blackboard, catch the teacher's voice more clearly. He could study the way the sentences were formed, how questions were asked. But that day, instead of the teacher, it was the boy in the blazer who caught his eye. Malik watched as Ethan pressed his palm to his forehead, then let it fall to the desk with something like resignation. It wasn't the look of someone lazy. Malik knew lazy. This was someone trying and failing and trying again. And even from outside, Malik recognized that look because it lived in him too. The difference was nobody expected anything from Malik. No one waited with crossed arms to scold him if he fell short. In some strange, twisted way that felt like a luxury. He stared, forgetting to write, as if trying to will the answer into the boy's hands. And for a moment he wished he could show him. Just lean in through the broken window and whisper, "That one, you don't overthink it." But people like him weren't allowed to whisper in places like this. Ethan shifted, feeling something, not a sound exactly, but a presence. He turned his head slowly, eyes scanning the back of the room toward the small, cracked window. And that's when their eyes met. Just for a second, maybe 2. But it landed with the weight of something neither of them had words for. Ethan didn't know what he expected to see. A janitor maybe, or a squirrel, or just the empty gray of the alley. But instead there was this boy, probably his age but thinner, sharper around the edges, with eyes that didn't flinch. He held a piece of cardboard like it was gold, a pencil nub gripped tight like a lifeline. Ethan blinked, stunned by the clarity of the stare. There was no shame in Malik's eyes, no apology for being where he wasn't supposed to be, just calm recognition, like they were equals. Like this moment, impossibly strange and completely silent, was something inevitable. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them looked away too fast. But something shifted. The boy outside didn't run, and Ethan didn't yell. The bell rang moments later and the classroom exploded into movement. Students gathered their things, chairs scraped the floor, laughter bubbled. Ethan stayed seated a moment longer, eyes flicking back to the window. Malik was gone. Just like that. No sound, no sign. Only the vague impression that he had really been there, that he wasn't a ghost. Ethan stood slowly, slipping his test into his backpack without looking at the grade. He exited the room in a daze, his thoughts still tangled with questions he couldn't quite name. Who was that boy? Why had he been watching? Why did it feel somehow that the boy knew more than the teacher at the front of the room? Meanwhile, Malik crouched once more in his hiding spot behind the fence. Chest tight, fingers cold, eyes locked on the memory of that moment. He had been seen, not just spotted, but seen, and nothing about that felt small. As he looked down at his cardboard, he noticed his pencil had snapped from pressing too hard. He tucked it in his sleeve and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow I come earlier." It was a cold November morning when Malik, hidden behind the rusted chain-link fence, saw the blackboard of Lincoln Hall for the very first time. With a piece of cardboard on his lap and a pencil stub in hand, he copied syllables from the air, listening like his life depended on it. That same morning, while students gathered outside under the sun, Ethan Harrison, son of the city's most feared man, failed yet another test and shrank under the weight of silent shame. And it was through the rear window of room 3B, broken for weeks and never repaired, that their eyes finally met. What should have been just another gray day became the beginning of something no one could have imagined. Malik wasn't used to being called by his name, not really. On the streets he was, "Hey kid, that crazy boy," or when people weren't pretending he didn't exist, "the son of the lunatic." The names changed depending on who was shouting or spitting in his direction, but they all carried the same message. He didn't matter. He was background noise, a misplaced shadow in a city too busy to care. So, when he heard footsteps behind him that morning and turned to see Ethan, the boy from the window, approaching the tree near the field, he stood up instinctively, ready to run. But Ethan didn't yell. He didn't call for a teacher. He didn't laugh or threaten. He just stopped a few feet away and asked simply, curiously, "What's your name?" Malik froze. For a second he thought he'd misheard. Maybe the question was meant for someone else. Maybe it wasn't real. It had been so long since anyone had wanted his name, not his pain, not his pity, just his name. He swallowed hard, unsure if he should even answer, but Ethan waited, his eyes steady, and eventually Malik said it softly, as if testing the sound. "Malik." And for the first time in a long time, that word felt like his. Ethan blinked, repeating the name to himself. Malik. He nodded like it meant something. "I'm Ethan." There was an awkward beat where neither of them knew what came next, but neither moved. Ethan looked down at the torn notebook Malik clutched to his chest and asked, "What are you doing?" Malik hesitated. "Math," he said finally. "Multiplication, mostly." Ethan frowned. "I'm terrible at it." Malik raised an eyebrow, unsure if this was some kind of trick. Ethan sat down in the dry grass anyway, right next to him, smoothing his school uniform with more nervous energy than arrogance. "Can you show me?" he asked. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a dare. It was a request. Malik stared at him for a moment, then lowered himself back to the ground. He opened his notebook, balancing it on his knee, and with the edge of a pencil so short it barely fit between his fingers, he drew out 2 sets of numbers. "It's like breaking things into parts," he began, his voice low but steady. "You can't think of 6 times 7 as just numbers. Think of it like 6 rows of 7 coins. Picture it. Count that." Ethan leaned in, nodding. For the first time, someone explained it in a way that didn't sound like punishment, and he understood. They stayed like that for almost half an hour, crouched over pages that smelled like damp cardboard and survival, going over problems Ethan had seen before but never really grasped. Malik explained with a calm precision that most teachers didn't bother to have. There were no impatient sighs, no raised voices, no red pens, just questions, patterns, and metaphors. Ethan asked things he was usually too embarrassed to say out loud in class, and Malik answered them like they were obvious. Not because Ethan was dumb, but because no one had taken the time to meet him where he was. "It's not that you don't know math," Malik said at one point. "It's just that no one taught you how to look at it, right?" Ethan looked up at him, then really looked, and Malik noticed. It wasn't a look of pity or charity. It was a look of respect. Malik felt something shift, subtly, like he'd stepped onto steadier ground without realizing it. He wasn't teaching to survive or to impress. He was teaching because someone actually wanted to learn from him. That feeling of being useful, of being enough, dug deep. It didn't need to be said aloud. Ethan just kept listening. At one point, Ethan pulled out a small granola bar from his backpack and offered it to Malik without ceremony. Malik eyed it, unsure. "It's not poisoned," Ethan joked, and Malik cracked the tiniest smile before taking it. He ate it slowly, as if savoring every crumb wasn't just about hunger, but about something more, being seen, being offered something without strings. "You always come here?" Ethan asked, watching him. Malik nodded. "When I can. Not always safe." Ethan didn't ask what that meant. He could see enough in Malik's face, the cautious glances, the flinch at sudden movement, the practiced silence. I'm glad you came today, Ethan said, and Malik looked at him, startled by the sincerity. Why? Malik asked. Ethan shrugged. Because no one's ever explained math to me like that before. Or anything, really. Malik tilted his head. You're in one of the best schools in the city. Yeah, Ethan said. And you're the first person who made me feel smart. The words hung between them, delicate but heavy. Malik didn't reply, but something in his chest unclenched. As the bell rang faintly in the distance, signaling the end of lunch, Ethan stood up slowly, brushing off his pants. Malik remained on the ground, his notebook clutched against his chest. Will you be here tomorrow? Ethan asked. Malik hesitated. He had learned not to count on tomorrow. But then he looked up at Ethan, really looked, and saw not just a rich boy in a pressed uniform, but someone who, like him, needed something more than what the world was offering. Maybe, Malik said. It was as close to a promise as he could make. Ethan nodded. I'll bring my math homework. Malik nodded back, and for a moment nothing needed to be explained. As Ethan turned and jogged back toward the building, Malik stayed seated, heart still and strange, watching him go. He whispered his name again under his breath, just to remember what it felt like. Malik. Malik wasn't used to being called by his name on the streets. He was just the crazy kid, the madman's boy. But when Ethan followed him to the tree beside the field the next day and asked, "What's your name?" it took Malik several seconds to believe the question was real. He answered quietly. There, between dry leaves and torn notebooks, the first lesson was born. Ethan listened carefully as Malik explained math with a natural clarity no teacher had ever shown. And for the first time, Ethan smiled, not because he got the answer right, but because someone finally understood him. And Malik smiled too, because at last someone had truly heard him. For 5 days straight, Ethan packed 2 lunches. He did it early in the morning, before the driver honked from the driveway and before his father's footsteps echoed down the hallway like a reminder. The first lunch was for him, as expected, labeled, boxed, perfectly portioned by the kitchen staff. The second, hastily wrapped in paper towels and plastic wrap, was hidden under a sweatshirt at the bottom of his bag. No one knew. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't tell the housekeeper. And especially not his father, who would have raised hell at the idea of his son sharing anything with a stranger, let alone a homeless boy. But it didn't matter. Every day during lunch break, Ethan would walk to the edge of the sports field like he was heading toward the tree to study. And without a word, he'd place the second lunch on the patch of grass between his backpack and the dirt. Just close enough for Malik to see it, but never so close that it looked like charity. Malik never asked for it, never reached out immediately. But once Ethan sat down and opened his own container, Malik would lean over and pick up the food, quiet but steady. Malik never said thank you, not once, not with words. But the way he peeled the sandwich slowly, the way his fingers carefully unfolded the wrapping like it was something sacred that said enough, Ethan never pushed it. He didn't need the words. The first day he brought 2 lunches, he half expected Malik to scoff or reject it. He was ready for a glare, maybe even an insult. But Malik had only nodded just once, like he was saying, I get it. You don't have to explain. That unspoken agreement became their rhythm. Food, then math. Math, then silence. Some days they barely spoke at all. Ethan would pull out his worksheet, drop it in front of Malik, and Malik would scan it, circle errors, redraw concepts on a scrap of old notebook paper. No lectures, no scolding. Just questions like, what do you think is happening here? Or what does the denominator tell you? Ethan found himself responding not because he had to, but because he wanted to. With Malik, mistakes didn't feel like shame. They felt like steps. Missteps maybe, but still movement. And that was something new. Fractions became their favorite subject, though Ethan hated them in class. Malik taught them like they were stories. You're not cutting pizza, he said once, you're cutting time. If you get 1/4 of a day, what do you do with it? Sleep? Play? Try again? Ethan had blinked, stunned by how human math could feel when Malik talked about it. 1/2 is different from 2/4. Even if they're equal in size, the journey's different, you see. And Ethan had nodded, not because he fully understood the logic, but because he understood Malik. There was something about the way he talked that made you lean in, not out of obligation, but out of respect. And Malik, for his part, began to see Ethan differently too. The rich boy wasn't just a grade chaser or another kid with expensive shoes. He had questions, wounds, hesitations. And Malik knew how that felt. Maybe not the same pressure, but pressure all the same. Malik, who'd spent most of his life caring for his father's unpredictable spirals, was now, without realizing it, caring for someone else, someone who didn't flinch when he spoke. One afternoon, Ethan didn't bring homework. He just sat down and said, I had a bad night. Malik looked up, waiting. My dad found out I got a B in literature. It wasn't even math, but he said I wasn't trying hard enough. Malik didn't say, I understand. Then, after a moment, he said, "You want to do fractions again or not?" Ethan let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Yeah, let's do fractions." They worked in near silence that day, just the scratch of pencils and the rustle of paper. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was shared. And that, to Ethan, was louder than any pep talk. After they finished, Ethan folded his empty wrapper and placed it back in his bag. Malik handed him back the corrected worksheet, corners bent but answers clean. "You only missed 2, he said. Ethan smiled. "That's better than last time." Malik shrugged. "You're learning." It was a simple phrase, but it struck deeper than anything a teacher had said all year. By the end of the week, Malik started bringing one of his old grammar books, water damaged, pages frayed, and offered to help Ethan with writing too. "You talk better than you write," he said. "Let's fix that." Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded and watched as Malik circled verbs like they were pieces of a puzzle. Ethan's self-doubt didn't vanish overnight, but it began to loosen its grip. And for Malik, who'd grown up invisible, the idea that his knowledge had value, that he had value, was still something he couldn't say out loud, but felt in his chest every time Ethan returned the next day, sat down, and waited for him to begin. In those lessons, something rare was happening, 2 boys teaching each other how to be whole without even realizing it. They weren't just filling in blanks on paper, they were filling in spaces that had been empty far too long. For days, Ethan had hidden 2 lunches in his backpack. One was his. The other he always left beside the tree without saying a word. Malik never thanked him, but his eyes always did. In return, Malik taught with quiet patience, fractions, grammar, even interpretation. Yet something deeper was unfolding. The silences between them became more meaningful than the lessons themselves. There, beneath that tree's shadow, 2 broken boys slowly began to repair. Malik, who had always cared for a father lost in his own mind, was now quietly tending to someone who, for the first time, looked at him without fear. And Ethan, weighed down by a father obsessed with perfection, found peace in a street teacher who asked for nothing but his effort. It was a Thursday afternoon, and nothing about it had warned Malik or Ethan that their small world was about to be cracked open. They sat as they always did, Ethan in his uniform, shoes kicked off, eyes squinting at the half-complete worksheet Malik had just corrected. Malik sat cross-legged, a cracked pencil tucked behind one ear, speaking softly as he explained why dividing by a fraction meant flipping and multiplying. Ethan nodded along, focused, present. It was their usual rhythm, a pocket of calm in 2 lives that had known too much pressure and not enough understanding. Then came the low hum of tires crunching gravel. Not unusual, until the door slammed. And Malik saw them, polished black dress shoes stepping down from the kind of car that didn't belong near grass. A tall man in a dark suit, flanked by 2 assistants in silence. Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison didn't speak right away, he didn't have to. The weight of his presence alone was enough to freeze time. His eyes moved slowly from his son's disheveled tie to the boy beside him, dressed in clothes that had clearly seen too many days and not enough nights inside. Malik didn't run. He didn't reach for his notebook, he didn't speak. But his spine straightened without meaning to, his hands clenched just tight enough to stay calm. Ethan stood up, brushing crumbs from his lap, but didn't back away from Malik. "Dad," he said, his voice not loud but solid, "this is Malik. He's my friend." The words sounded louder than anything Malik had ever heard. And in the same breath, Ethan added what mattered most: "He teaches me." The assistants exchanged glances. Mr. Harrison didn't. For a long moment, Mr. Harrison said nothing. He studied Malik the way someone might study a riddle with a missing piece, not out of disgust, but with intense calculation. Malik lowered his gaze, not from shame, but instinct. He wasn't supposed to be here, not this close, not visible. He had spent years perfecting the art of blending into corners, of slipping away before anyone important noticed, but this time there was nowhere to go. Still, he stood his ground. No shaking, no excuses. Just a quiet dignity that came from knowing who you are, even when the world constantly tries to rewrite you. Mr. Harrison tilted his head slightly, as if trying to place what he was seeing. The torn hem, the bruised knuckles, the sharp mind hiding behind guarded silence. And something shifted in him, not visibly but deeply, like a door long rusted shut, remembering it had a key. Ethan stepped forward again. "I know you probably think this is not okay," he said, choosing his words carefully, "but I've been learning more from Malik than from my tutors. He explains things in a way I actually get. He listens." Mr. Harrison finally turned his gaze back to his son. The expression in his eyes softened, not much, but enough for Ethan to recognize it wasn't anger behind them. It was something closer to confusion. Or maybe even curiosity. Malik still hadn't moved. He stood just a few feet away, shoulders squared but silent. Mr. Harrison looked at him again. "And you?" he asked. His voice was low but direct. "You're not in school?" Malik shook his head. "No, sir, why?" the man asked. Malik hesitated. "No one to pay for it," he said simply. He wasn't meant to trigger pity. It was a fact laid out like a fraction problem. Mr. Harrison absorbed the answer slowly, as if he weren't used to hearing truth delivered with that kind of calm clarity. What happened next wasn't dramatic. Mr. Harrison didn't shout, Malik didn't cry, Ethan didn't beg. Instead, there was only silence. Thick, weighted, but strangely respectful. Mr. Harrison nodded once, almost to himself. It was the kind of nod that meant something had been filed away, not dismissed. He looked one last time at Malik, then at Ethan, and said only, "We'll talk at home." Then he turned and walked back to his car, shoes clicking against the pavement with the kind of authority that could make walls straighten. Ethan exhaled like he hadn't breathed in minutes. Malik stayed still. Ethan looked at him. "That could have gone worse," he said with a weak smile. Malik gave a small nod, but his eyes stayed fixed on where the car had been. Something had changed. He didn't know what yet, but he knew the difference between being seen as a threat and being seen as a possibility. Today, for the first time, he wasn't invisible. It was on a Thursday that the world collapsed. Mr. Harrison stepped out of his black car, his shoes gleaming with the weight of his empire, and found his son sitting in the grass with a boy wearing clothes torn by time. The silence that followed was as tense as the sirens Malik had learned to ignore on cold nights. But Ethan didn't flinch. "Dad, he's my friend. He teaches me." Mr. Harrison looked at Malik like he was trying to decode a puzzle. Malik didn't run. He simply lowered his eyes. And in that look filled with pain. But rooted in something stronger, the most powerful man in the city saw something he hadn't remembered in years. Humanity. Mr. Harrison said nothing the next day. No confrontations at breakfast, no questioning glances across the table. Not even a mention of the boy with torn clothes or the lessons beneath the tree. But silence for a man like him was never passive. That Friday evening he made a single call, brief, direct, and final. Find out where the boy lives. By tomorrow morning, by Saturday, he knew, and he wanted to see it himself. Not through a report, not through a window, but with his own eyes. So just after sunrise, Mr. Harrison instructed his driver to take the long route to the part of the city he had long erased from his memory. The car rolled slowly into a narrow alley where garbage cans outnumbered people, and concrete cracked like open wounds. There, seated on a filthy stretch of sidewalk, was a man talking to the air like it answered him back. He rocked slightly, his shirt stained with time, hands trembling as he whispered at lampposts, laughing softly at nothing at all. This was Raymond, Malik's father. Malik crouched beside him, holding a small plastic container of soup with one hand, trying to steady the spoon with the other. "Come on, Dad," he murmured, "just a little." "You haven't eaten since yesterday." Raymond didn't even glance at the food. His attention was locked onto something far beyond reach, a bird only he could see, a war only he could fight. Malik tried again, shifting the cup closer. "It's still warm. You used to love this kind." His voice cracked, but he didn't cry. There was no room left for tears, only attempts. "Mr." Harrison watched from the car, stunned. This was the boy who had stood tall before him. The one who taught math beneath trees, who didn't flinch at confrontation. And here he was, kneeling on concrete, ignored by the one person who should have protected him. For a man like Mr. Harrison, who had spent his life solving problems with money, strategy, and dominance, what he saw on that sidewalk struck at the one weakness he hated admitting: helplessness. The longer he watched, the heavier it felt. Malik didn't plead for attention. He didn't act like a victim. He didn't even notice the black sedan idling a few yards away. He was too focused, too practiced. This wasn't new for him. This was routine. Every motion, lifting his father's arm, adjusting his torn hoodie to shield him from the breeze, was rehearsed. Lived in. Mr. Harrison leaned forward in his seat, fingers gripping the edge of the leather door. His own son sat beside him, silent. Ethan had said nothing since they turned onto the street, but now he spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be heard. "He takes care of his dad every day," he said. That was all. One sentence. But it shattered something. Mr. Harrison looked at his son, then back at Malik. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't see a statistic, or a stray, or a disruption. He saw a child who had been carrying the weight of a world that didn't belong on his shoulders. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how quiet the car had become. "Drive slowly," he said to the chauffeur. "I want to see more." But the driver hesitated. "Sir?" Mr. Harrison didn't repeat himself. The car pulled ahead just enough to give a wider view. Raymond had begun to sway more aggressively, mumbling louder now, flinching at ghosts. Malik put the soup down, gently placed both hands on his father's shoulders, and whispered something Mr. Harrison couldn't hear. It didn't matter. The message was in the way Malik touched his father's cheek, not with frustration, but with memory, like he was trying to reach the version of the man who used to hum lullabies, who once taught him how to tie a knot or draw a circle. And that was when it hit Mr. Harrison hardest. Not the poverty, not the madness, but the loyalty. That kind of love didn't come from survival alone. It came from something stronger, something he feared he had never given his own son. The driver asked carefully, "Should I call someone, sir?" Mr. Harrison exhaled through his nose. For a moment he didn't answer. Then, as he watched Malik lift his father's arm again and tuck a napkin beneath his chin as if dignity could be folded back into place, he replied, slowly, clearly, and without a trace of hesitation, "This boy doesn't need charity." The words were not for show. They were for himself. He needs a chance. His tone silenced the car. It silenced something inside him too, the noise of self-justification, of detachment, of years spent believing some people just didn't try hard enough. The world was built by men like him. But now he saw sometimes the strongest people are the ones no one sees. And sometimes the greatest minds are hidden behind broken doors and torn notebooks. Mr. Harrison hadn't spoken a word the day before, but he had ordered an investigation. And that Saturday morning he sat parked in front of an alley and saw Raymond, Malik's father, sitting on the sidewalk, talking to poles, hugging the wind. Malik knelt beside him, trying to feed him soup, but being ignored. And it was in that moment that Mr. Harrison felt something he hadn't felt in decades: helplessness. From the back seat, Ethan watched it all in silence. "Who takes care of his dad every day?" he whispered. And for the first time in years, Mr. Harrison stepped down from his pedestal. "This boy doesn't need charity," he told the driver. "He needs a chance." The moment Malik crossed the threshold of the Harrison home, something inside him flinched. Not from fear exactly, but from the overwhelming sense that all of this wasn't real. The doormat was clean, the floor spotless. There was a scent in the air that felt almost artificial to him, like those laundromat commercials he used to watch through department store windows. Soap and warm bread. A house that smelled like care. He hesitated by the door, unsure whether to step forward or backward. Ethan appeared from around the corner, barefoot and grinning like it was just another Sunday. "You can come in," he said gently. Almost like he was inviting someone into a fort they had built together. Mr. Harrison stood behind him, not speaking, not smiling, but not turning him away either. That meant more than words. Malik walked in slowly, his body rigid, his eyes darting to corners and exits. This wasn't a trap, but years on the streets had trained him to assume every kindness came with a catch. He clutched his backpack close at things so thin and worn it couldn't even hold fear anymore. When the housekeeper gestured toward the bathroom, Malik didn't move at first. "For you," she said, her voice soft but matter-of-fact. It took him several seconds to understand she meant he could actually use it, alone, no line, no soap rationed out like it was gold. When he turned the faucet, the water didn't sputter. It flowed, warm, steady, endless. He stood under it until his skin began to prickle, until steam fogged the mirror, and he couldn't see the reflection of the boy who had slept on bus stop benches. The clothes left for him were simple: clean jeans, a navy hoodie, socks without holes. When he stepped out, towel clutched around his waist, he moved like someone handling glass. Ethan was waiting at the end of the hallway, arms crossed and eyes beaming. "Told you the shower was like magic," he said. Malik didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Something about being dry, really dry, made his body feel new. He sat at the dining table for the first time in his life. Not at a shelter, not at a soup line, but at an actual table with a plate, a fork, and a chair that didn't wobble. When he reached for the bread, his hands shook. The room was quiet as he ate, but it wasn't the silence of pity. No one stared. No one asked him questions he couldn't answer. Mr. Harrison read the newspaper. Ethan played with the edge of his placemat. And Malik focused on chewing, not because he didn't know how, but because chewing slowly was a luxury. He'd grown used to eating quickly, defensively, like someone might snatch the food away. No one did. The butter on the bread melted too fast and he forgot to wipe his mouth and no one said a word. It wasn't until the second helping that his body stopped bracing for interruption. That night, Ethan showed him the room he'd sleep in. It wasn't big, but it had a window, a real mattress, and a dresser with drawers that actually opened. Malik placed his backpack next to the bed but didn't unpack. He lay down without removing his shoes. When Ethan noticed, he offered a quiet, "You're safe here, you know." Malik nodded, but even when the lights were off, he kept one eye open just in case. Just like the streets had taught him. The first morning of school felt like wearing someone else's life. The uniform ironed clean, his name sewn into the tag, made him look like any other student. But he didn't feel like them. He knew they had never skipped meals for 2 days. Had never carried a grown man through a panic attack. Had never written essays in their head because they had no paper. Ethan walked beside him like it was the most natural thing, chatting about the pop quiz he hoped didn't happen and the math problem he still didn't understand. Malik listened but said little. When they reached the classroom, some students looked up, curious, others skeptical. A new kid was always gossip-worthy. A new kid with second-hand shoes and guarded eyes, even more so. Malik took his seat beside Ethan, his posture perfect, hands folded on the desk. When the teacher called on him during reading comprehension, he answered before she finished the question. His voice didn't stammer. His words were clear, sharp, direct. The room fell quiet. She smiled, surprised. He didn't. More questions followed, and each time Malik responded with the same precision, not showing off, just answering. Every sentence was another brick laid in the path to being seen, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. Ethan grinned beside him like he had known all along that this would happen. The others watched with a mix of confusion and awe. Malik didn't care. He wasn't there for them. He was there for the blackboard, for the lesson, for the questions, for the chance. When the bell rang, the teacher pulled him aside and told him he was exceptional. He didn't smile at that. He didn't know how to believe it yet, but he nodded and walked out like any other student, head high, uniform straight, heart steady. Ethan caught up to him at the lockers. "I told you they'd be shocked," he joked. Malik allowed a quiet chuckle, the sound rusty but real. That Sunday, Malik had entered the Harrison home for the first time. The scent of detergent and freshly baked bread had felt foreign. He took a hot shower, wore clean clothes, and sat at a dinner table, trembling. Ethan smiled at him as if he had been waiting all along. Malik still slept with one eye open, like on the streets, but the mattress was soft. At school, wearing a uniform, he sat beside Ethan and answered every question the teacher asked with uncanny precision. The other students stared, stunned. But Malik had eyes only for the blackboard. For the first time, he was part of the lesson, not an object of pity, but its subject. Raymond's admission to the clinic happened quietly, with no grand declarations or long conversations. Mr. Harrison handled the paperwork, found a place with real care, not just beds, and made sure everything was done quickly, efficiently. But for Malik, nothing about it was simple. Seeing the man who had once carried him on his shoulders, now needing to be carried himself, wasn't something he could digest in a day. The first Sunday he visited, clinic staff warned him gently, "Some days are harder than others." Malik nodded but said nothing. He sat in the small, bright room with his hands in his lap, watching his father stare at a blank wall like it was speaking to him. "Hey, Dad, it's me," he tried. Raymond blinked, then laughed, not at him, but at something no one else could see. Malik waited, said nothing more. You learned when you loved someone with a fractured mind that silence wasn't absence, it was patience. After an hour, he stood, placed the sandwich he'd brought on the tray, and whispered, "I'll come back next week." No answer came, but he didn't need one. He'd already learned how to love without expecting anything in return. Over the next few Sundays, a rhythm began to form. Malik would arrive with a small bag, always carrying something that didn't matter to anyone else but meant something to his father. A cracked cassette tape, a folded paper airplane, a drawing from when he was 6. Sometimes Raymond looked at him and smiled. Other times he looked past him entirely, eyes foggy with whatever storm was raging in his head. The nurses were kind, but Malik never stayed long. He didn't want to overwhelm. He only wanted his father to remember, not everything, just that someone still came. Mr. Harrison never walked in, never said a word, but he was there too, each time, watching from behind the glass wall that divided visitors from those who didn't always recognize them. He never interrupted, never made his presence known, but Malik always knew. And deep down he appreciated it. There was something comforting about being watched by someone who didn't demand anything, someone who just ... showed up. One Sunday afternoon, Raymond was lucid, at least for a few minutes. He saw Malik and began humming, a tune about a fisherman in a boat, one Malik hadn't heard since he was 5. The boy's face tightened, his hands trembling just slightly as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded napkin with his name written in Sharpie. He handed it over. Raymond blinked, touched it like it was fragile, and began to cry. No words. Just tears that slid down a face that had seen too much. Malik didn't cry. He couldn't. He was too busy memorizing the way his father looked when he remembered, when he still felt like his dad. "I brought you your song," Malik said, placing a cheap MP3 player with a single headphone in his father's hand. The melody started. Raymond closed his eyes. The tears didn't stop. Malik sat back. It was enough. It had to be. And then another Sunday came, the one that would stay with them both forever. Malik was sitting by the bed, telling his father about the science test he had helped Ethan study for. "He got an A," he said, pride seeping into his voice even though the grade wasn't his. He didn't even need to look at the formulas this time. Raymond was quiet, still distant, but his breathing had slowed, his head tilted toward the boy's voice as if drawn by it. Malik leaned in closer and whispered, "It's okay, Dad. I'm doing good at school. You don't have to worry." His voice dropped even lower. "I got it now." On the other side of the glass wall, Mr. Harrison watched, unmoving, deeply silent, something in his chest pulling tight. It wasn't pity, it wasn't guilt, it was awe. Because what he saw in that moment was something money had never given him, a child showing up, week after week, for a parent who couldn't even say thank you. The boy's voice cracked slightly as he added, "Ethan's been trying really hard. I help him like you helped me when I was small, remember?" Of course, Raymond didn't answer, but Malik held his hand anyway. And Mr. Harrison, without fully understanding why, sat down on the bench outside the glass, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the boy who taught his son, who loved his father, who still showed up for people even when no one ever really showed up for him. That kind of loyalty wasn't taught in elite schools. It didn't come from wealth or discipline or parental ambition. It was something pure, something born from fire but not consumed by it. It was the kind of love that refused to die, no matter how long it went unreturned. And for the first time in years, Mr. Harrison felt small, not ashamed, not broken, just ... small in the face of something that large. That day, as they left the clinic, Malik walking 2 steps ahead and Ethan beside him, Mr. Harrison placed a hand gently on Malik's shoulder. The boy turned, not startled, just curious. "From now on," the man said, clearing his throat, "call me Mr. H, not Mr. Harrison." Malik looked up, eyebrows raised slightly, searching the older man's face. There was no tension there, no performance, just sincerity. Malik didn't smile, not exactly, but something in his expression softened. He gave a small nod. "Okay," he said. Then, after a pause that felt like it belonged to another world, he added quietly, "Thank you for Mr. H, a man who once measured value by results and power." That was the first moment he truly understood what gratitude meant. There was no adoption decree, no courtroom ceremony, no official stamp to declare what everyone had already begun to feel. Malik was still Malik, legally unclaimed, undocumented, and, on paper, invisible. But something had shifted so completely around him that even the absence of a signature didn't matter anymore. At Lincoln Hall, people had stopped calling him the kid from the street or whispering questions about where he came from. Now they simply said, "That's Mr. H's boy." It wasn't said with pity, it wasn't said with hesitation. It was said like a fact, a quiet, settled fact. And when Ethan introduced him to new students, he did it with zero awkwardness. "This is my brother." Sometimes he added, "He's smarter than me," with a proud grin that made Malik roll his eyes but secretly meant everything. There were no documents, no birth certificates, no custody orders. But he had a room. He had a shelf full of books. He had drawers with socks folded inside. He had an email address Ethan had helped him set up, which he still checked cautiously, unsure of who might write him. And he had something no paperwork could replicate, the daily, consistent presence of people who saw him as theirs. But even with that new world blooming around him, the past refused to loosen its grip. Malik still startled at loud knocks. When a door slammed by accident, his shoulders would flinch, sometimes so subtly no one noticed except Ethan. He still hoarded food under his bed at night, not out of greed but instinct. Bags of crackers, apples, sealed juice boxes he never drank. It had taken months for Ethan to realize what was happening. He said one night, crouching by the bed, "You know there's more in the kitchen, right?" Malik didn't answer, just looked away, face hard, ashamed. Ethan didn't push, he just nodded. "Okay, keep it if it makes you feel better." That was it. No lectures, no embarrassment. And little by little the stash shrank. The nightmares didn't. Some nights Malik stayed up, eyes half open, staring at the ceiling like it owed him an explanation. The dark still felt too close. But now, on most nights, Ethan lay on the floor beside his bed, telling jokes or reading aloud from comics. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "You good?" he'd ask in the quiet, and Malik, after a pause, would whisper, "Yeah." That word meant more than anything either of them had learned in school. The idea of family had always been something Malik observed from afar, like a TV show playing in someone else's apartment. He'd never thought it could include him, not really. So when teachers began to say "your dad" when referring to Mr. H, he never corrected them. He didn't quite believe it himself. Not yet, but he also didn't reject it. At first he hesitated to ask for things: new notebooks, extra help with science, a second plate at dinner. It felt too close to being needy, and Malik had spent too long being punished by the world for simply having needs. But Mr. H had his own way of building trust. He didn't say much, didn't crowd Malik with affection, but he noticed things. Quietly, he refilled the pencil drawer. Quietly, he added Malik to the school field trip list. Quietly, he showed up, again and again, in a way no one else ever had. And that consistency, that quiet refusal to leave, began to rewrite something inside Malik that paperwork never could. He began to expect things. He began to hope. The first time Malik wrote his name in his new school notebook, he paused. Just for a second. His hand hovered over the page as if waiting for permission. Then slowly he began to write. Not with the shaky, hurried scrawl of someone who didn't believe they had the right, but with a steady hand. Malik, just that. No last name, no embellishment. And then deliberately he placed a period, a full stop, like it mattered, like his name deserved punctuation. Ethan saw it later that night and grinned. "Looks like someone's got author energy," he teased, nudging Malik with his shoulder. Malik shrugged, but inside something warm uncoiled. He hadn't just written a word, he had claimed space. Ink on paper. A declaration. I exist. I belong. Still, there were moments when Malik wondered what came next. He heard whispers from other kids, questions about why he lived with the Harrisons, why he didn't have parents who came to school events. Some asked if he was adopted. He didn't know how to answer. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be. Would a new last name erase what had come before? Would signing a paper mean pretending Raymond never existed? One night, as he sat alone in the kitchen flipping through a book of short stories, Mr. H walked in. He didn't ask what Malik was thinking. Instead, he simply said, "You don't owe the world an explanation, son." Malik looked up, surprised. "I'm not your son," he said, not with anger, just confusion. Mr. H didn't flinch. "You don't have to be on paper. You already are." Then he walked away, leaving Malik staring at the spot where he'd stood. No ceremony, no drama, just truth. Malik sat there long after, notebook open, pen in hand, unsure what to write next, but no longer afraid to. So no, there was no official adoption. No government file to prove what they were building together. But in every way that counted, Malik was no longer alone. He had a brother who stood up for him at school, a man who showed up without fail, and a life that, while still full of scars, no longer bled every day. And Malik, for the first time, no longer wrote his name in the margins. He placed it at the top of the page, bold, centered, and whole. Malik, with a firm hand, and always a period at the end. On the day of the science presentation, Malik's hand shook with a nervous energy he couldn't control. It wasn't the kind of trembling that came from the winter wind slicing through layers of old clothes on a street corner. This was different. It was deeper, almost ancestral, as if his body still hadn't caught up with the fact that he now belonged somewhere. He stood backstage in the school auditorium, holding a folder that Ethan had helped him design. His project was detailed, but it wasn't just data and charts, it was personal. Every line of research had been chosen not just to impress the panel, but to say something real about the life he had lived. Ethan, standing behind him, placed a steady hand on Malik's shoulder. "You've got this," he said. Malik nodded, but his throat felt tight. Mr. Harrison had arrived early and sat in the front row. Dressed impeccably as always, but today his expression was soft, unreadable. Teachers filled the rows behind him. Students whispered, waiting. Malik took one last breath, stepped onto the stage, and for the first time in his life stood in front of a crowd, not to beg, not to survive, but to speak. He opened his presentation with a stammer. But the moment he mentioned solar panels in underserved communities, something shifted. His voice, though initially uncertain, found rhythm, not from memorization but conviction. Many families, he said, live in places where heating is a privilege, where darkness isn't just at night, it's in the way they're treated, the way they're forgotten. The room was still. He pointed at his slides, not flashy ones, but clean, organized. He explained how renewable energy could be decentralized, how solar grids could empower neighborhoods deemed invisible. I know what it's like, he added, to light a room with candles because the power's been out for weeks. I know what it's like to choose between food and heating. Each word landed like a quiet thunder. He didn't cry. His voice didn't break. But his truth vibrated through the room more loudly than any microphone could have amplified. Ethan managed the laptop beside him, changing slides at just the right moment, but his eyes never left Malik's face. And in the middle of the presentation, as Malik explained a prototype he built from discarded materials, someone in the audience whispered, "Who is this kid?" As he finished, there was a long silence. For a split second, Malik's old fears tried to creep back in, the fear of ridicule, of being unseen, of not being enough. But then the silence was broken, not by polite claps, but by applause so full, so earnest, it startled even him. Some teachers were on their feet, others wiped their eyes. One of the science faculty, the same man who once told Mr. H that Malik probably wouldn't keep up, stood, with both hands to his mouth. The principal had tears running down his face, and though he tried to compose himself, his voice cracked as he whispered, "Brilliant." Malik didn't bow. He just stood there, trying to take it in. His fingers no longer trembled. Ethan, standing beside him, gave him a soft nudge and whispered, "Told you." Malik nodded, and in that small movement, there was the weight of years carried and now released, not forgotten but finally understood by others. He didn't just pass the test, he transformed the room. Mr. Harrison stood slowly from the front row, his steps deliberate, eyes locked on Malik as he walked up to the stage. There was no fanfare in his stride, just presence. He didn't take the mic. He didn't ask permission. He simply turned to the audience, hands in his pockets, and began to speak. "You all saw brilliance today," he said, voice calm but commanding. "But I want you to remember something." He paused, looking back at Malik for a second. "Never judge a child by where he sleeps. Judge him by what he can build, if you give him a place to dream." The room fell into reverent silence again, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was reverent. Mr. Harrison gently placed his hand on Malik's shoulder, the way fathers do when they're not sure how to say "I'm proud" out loud. And in that moment, nothing else existed, not wealth, not status, not past mistakes, just recognition. As Mr. Harrison stepped down from the stage, Malik looked out at the sea of faces, and something in him gave way. But it wasn't fear or shame this time. It was release. Psst. Tears filled his eyes, the kind that don't come from pain, but from finally seeing your truth honored. He didn't try to wipe them away. Let them see, he thought. Let them see what it means to be broken and still rise. He caught Ethan's eyes in the crowd and saw them glistening too. It wasn't about science anymore. It wasn't even about school. It was about a moment, one that neither of them had ever dared to imagine, where a boy who once studied through broken windows was now standing on a stage, being clapped for by the very world that once looked through him. So Malik cried, not because he was afraid, not because he was ashamed, not because something had gone wrong. He cried because something, at last, had gone right. The applause continued, not because of pity, but because they had witnessed something real. He stepped back from the mic and sat beside Ethan again, the project still glowing on the screen. Mr. Harrison remained in the front row, his gaze never wavering. And Malik, for the first time, didn't feel like he was surviving a moment. He was living it, truly. The final test wasn't on the paper or in the slides. It was in the space he now occupied, fully, freely, and unapologetically. A boy no longer just dreaming from the outside, but invited in. It had been months since the science fair. Months since Malik had stepped onto a stage and found the world listening instead of looking away. So much had changed. He now had a room with bookshelves, a school ID with his name, and even a seat at the dinner table that no one questioned. And yet, when Ethan asked if they could go back to the tree, the one behind Lincoln Hall, where it had all started, Malik didn't hesitate. They slipped away on a quiet Saturday, avoiding the front gates and instead taking the long route past the old fence where Malik used to peek in, notebook pressed to his chest. As they walked up to the tree, now shedding the last of its autumn leaves, a strange hush fell over them. They weren't boys sneaking crumbs anymore. They were young men with something to look back on. Malik ran his hand across the bark, feeling the faint scars of time, and found the spot where he once sharpened his pencil with a rock. Ethan pulled a marker from his hoodie and smiled. "You think they'll expel us for this?" he joked. "Probably," Malik grinned, "but I'd say it's worth it." Ethan crouched down by the base of the trunk first, then stood back and examined it as if he were sketching something in his mind. Then, with the marker in hand, he wrote slowly, deliberately, carving each letter with care as if it were more than just words. Here the future began. Malik laughed, a full, rich laugh that came from somewhere deep, not because it was funny, but because it was true. He stood beside Ethan, watching the letters settle into the grain like a quiet promise. "You really think so?" Malik asked, a little softer now. Ethan didn't even blink. "I know so. That day you sat here and taught me fractions like it was nothing. That changed everything." Malik didn't know how to answer, so he didn't. He just leaned back against the tree, letting the moment sit between them. They didn't need to say much. The silence was the same as before, but heavier now, filled with memories that only they could understand. In the distance, someone cleared their throat gently. Mr. Harrison stood not far off, hands in his pockets, watching them the way a parent might watch a child take their first steps, quietly, proudly, and a little broken inside by the beauty of it all. He wasn't the same man who once stepped out of a black car expecting perfection and handing out orders like contracts. His posture had softened, his gaze more human. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, letting the boys, no, the brothers, have their moment. Malik turned to look at him, gave a small nod, and Mr. Harrison nodded back. He didn't cry, but his eyes were red. He had followed the map of Malik's journey from the cracked sidewalks where Raymond once ranted to the classroom. Podium, and this tree, this spot behind the school, was the invisible ink on that map. Later, he would tell others that the moment didn't need photos. "You don't frame a sunrise," he'd say. "You just stand there and witness it." As the afternoon light faded, Malik pulled something from his backpack. A folded piece of paper, worn, creased at the edges, but still whole. Ethan looked over, curious. "What's that?" Malik didn't answer right away. He walked over to the broken window at the back of Lincoln Hall, the same window through which he used to listen to classes. The one no one ever fixed because no one ever looked back there. He knelt down, carefully wedged the paper between the sill and the frame. Then he stood up and took a long breath. Ethan stepped beside him and read over his shoulder. The note was short, just one line. "Thank you for not kicking me out of the world." They both stood there, quiet. That window had once been a lifeline. Now, it was a farewell. But not the sad kind, the kind that comes with peace. Malik didn't need to look in from the outside anymore. He had made it in. They sat by the tree again, not talking much. Malik pulled out a sandwich from his backpack, this time one he had made, and handed half to Ethan without a word. Ethan raised an eyebrow but accepted it. "Role reversal, huh?" Malik chuckled. "Something like that." They ate in silence, the kind they used to share in the beginning, but now it didn't feel like survival, it felt like gratitude. Ethan pulled out his phone and took a photo of the writing on the tree. "So we don't forget," he said. Malik nodded, but deep down he knew he never would. The tree had changed, the boys had changed, but the roots were the same. Their story wasn't about pity or charity, it was about being seen, about being chosen, and about choosing each other in return. They didn't need more words. Some friendships are carved so deep that even time can't erase them. And long after the sun dipped behind the school's roof, after the boys had walked away and Mr. Harrison had driven them home in silence, the tree still stood. The writing on its trunk remained, uneven, slightly crooked, but clear. It bore witness not to the beginning of a friendship, but to the rebirth of two lives that had found meaning through each other. And by that old broken window, tucked just inside the crack, the note stayed where Malik had left it. No one would find it for months, maybe years. But one day, someone would, and they'd read it, and they'd understand not just the words, but the world they came from. Because sometimes healing begins not with a rescue, but with a question no one ever asked before. "What's your name?" We poured our hearts into bringing this story to life, not just to tell it, but to connect with you. If this story moved you in any way, we'd love to know. What did it make you feel? Leave us a comment below. Your words truly matter to us. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel. It may seem like a small gesture, but for us it means the world. It helps us keep creating meaningful content just for you. Take a moment to explore our other videos too. Each one was made with care and intention. Thank you for being here. Your presence keeps this community alive.